Jackson hunched over a scatter of softly glowing screens, jaw shadowed with days of neglect, eyes rimmed by fatigue and focus. The recycled air tasted of ozone and moss, a sterile cocktail tinged with the pulse of alien spores clinging to every vent and surface. His hands danced across a tablet, fingers stained faint green from the day's samples. Beyond the reinforced Plex window, the Lyra jungle shimmered in the eternal night, every leaf and twisting limb aglow with bioluminescent veins, an ocean of silver and emerald, shadow and shimmer, alive with secrets the station's walls could not contain. He muttered as he logged his observations. Spore cluster G, 60% harmonic resonance, nitrogen uptake up by 0.5%. Note: adjust nutrient mix. Jackson paused, rubbing his thumb along his jaw. The silence inside the biosphere was different than the hush of a university lab. Here, it was profound. No colleagues whispering in corners, no administrative footsteps echoing down hallways, just the hush of plants, the hum of filters, the ghostly sigh of Lyra's wind against steel. Jackson, VO. 400 days. That's how long Lyra has been my world. I left behind the noise of Earth's academia, trading politics for the purity of xenobotany. Here, my research on harmonic growth is reality. Plants don't gossip, they just live or die. A flicker of orange invaded the edge of his vision. He glanced up. The perimeter cam's display danced with static, resolving into a pulsing motion alert. Jackson's heart picked up. Again. He cycled through feeds, slow and deliberate. On the east border, something glinted, a streak of gold darting beneath the bioluminescent canopy, too fast for the system's tracking algorithms. The alert logged as a glitch. Jackson's lips tightened. He knew better. Outside, the sky bruised to purple as an evening storm gathered. Rain rattled against the metal skin of the biosphere, and thunder rolled, distant but insistent. Jackson donned a poncho and stepped through the airlock into the sodden dusk. Water sheeted from the eaves, pooling around the legs of the soil sampler he'd left out by mistake. Or rather, the legs where it had been. The sampler itself was gone, cable sliced clean. He crouched, running his finger along the edge. A perfect cut, not torn or chewed. Damn, he muttered, scanning the tree line. The jungle answered with a chorus of churrs and shifting shadows, the gold flash already vanished. He pocketed a fragment of cable, feeling the prickle of being watched. Back inside, he double-checked the locks, flicked off the outer lights, and set the biosphere's sensors to maximum. Night deepened, rain blurring the view beyond the glass. Jackson poured himself a mug of synth coffee, watched the monitors, and waited. The warning klaxon shattered the quiet. Red glyphs strobed across the main hatch's screen. Quarantine breach. Jackson's pulse hammered in his throat. He grabbed a containment rod, the cool alloy reassuring in his grip, and crept down the corridor to the airlock. Through the viewing pane, mist swirled, condensation curling in the harsh light. A shape moved within, almost lost in the shifting fog. Female, upright, tall and lithe, golden fur caught the light, shimmering wet. Amber eyes, large and keen, fixed on him through the glass, ears, pointed and feline, flicked in agitation. Her shoulders rippled with muscle and wariness, tail lashing once, twice, as she took in the situation. Jackson's breath caught. He lifted the handheld scanner, thumb flicking the switch. Blue light swept over her form, casting sharp shadows. She met his gaze, unblinking. Then she growled, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to shudder through the walls and the bones of his chest. In one motion, she lashed out. The scanner splintered in his hand, pieces rattling to the floor. The inner door hissed open, a breath of wet air rolling in. Jackson stepped back, rod lowered, palms open and empty. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice careful, steady. "You're safe here." For a heartbeat, they faced each other, the tension crackling like the dying storm outside. Then, with a flick of her tail and a last searching glance, she slipped past him, her stride silent, her silhouette swallowed by the corridor's shadows. In the days that followed, Jackson patched the broken equipment, but left the sensors dark. He trusted his instincts. If she wanted to be seen, she would show herself. He placed a dish of food by the hatch each night, a silent offering. By the second morning, the dish was bare, licked spotless and set aside. He watched for her in the mornings, naming her Syrah. Silent, he thought, for the quiet sorrow in her eyes. He started a secret log, voice low as he hid in the brush, recording her. Subject Syrah emits low-frequency vibration. Purring, aggressive with drones, but when I'm close, the sound shifts. Calmer, almost curious. One evening, a monsoon hammered the biosphere, wind howling like something alive. He peered through rain-streaked glass and spotted her. Syrah, drenched and shivering beneath a broad-leafed tree, fur tangled and slick. Jackson retrieved a thermal wrap, laid it carefully in the clearing, and retreated. By dawn, the wrap was gone. When he opened his door, something new waited for him. A fruit, spiral-shaped and faintly glowing, set with deliberate care on the threshold. He picked it up, marveling at the iridescent skin, the scent sweet and sharp. Looking up, he spotted her in a high branch, curled tight, his blanket wrapped around her. Syrah watched him with those luminous eyes, still wary, but no longer afraid. A fragile trust had begun, bright as the jungle's midnight glow. Jackson's research shifted in subtle, undeniable ways. Where once he'd charted nutrient cycles and light curves, now Syrah had become the nucleus of his work. Her presence, her purr, the curious harmony she carried. Each morning he found himself waiting for her golden shadow at the edge of the biosphere's clearing. When she settled nearby, the lush beds of bioluminescent moss seemed to brighten. Leaves unfurling faster, tendrils thickening with vigor. He documented it all, voice low and reverent as he watched. "Test plot delta," he murmured into his recorder, eyes flicking from Syrah to the data. Growth rate has tripled since Syrah began frequenting this area. Harmonic readings show a resonance spike when she's present. No artificial stimulus matches the effect. He set up controlled trials, placing sensors near her favorite perches, and soon uncovered a pattern. Her purr, a deep, rolling sound that vibrated through soil and stone, was more than comfort or warning. It was a catalyst, a localized bioharmony, coaxing the flora to accelerate, blossom, twist toward her in adoration. Syrah watched him with those unreadable amber eyes, head cocked as he read aloud from his battered journals, his voice rising and falling in the quiet. Sometimes he switched to poetry, half as an experiment, half as confession. There is another sky, ever serene and fair. Jackson's words lingered in the air. Syrah's purr deepened, a thrumming bass that seemed to wind through his bones. He paused, looked up. "Are you tuning to me?" he asked, curiosity softening his voice. She blinked, gaze unblinking, and her purr shifted again. Higher, sweeter, resonant as if the jungle itself answered. Their new routine became a silent duet. Jackson would sit in the clearing, reading, his voice a steady current. Syrah nearby, her purr evolving in time with his cadence. Sometimes he would glance up and find her eyes already on him, a flicker of understanding passing between them. One humid afternoon, curiosity led Jackson beyond the perimeter. He followed a faint trail, the ferns still bent from Syrah's passage. The heat pressed close, heavy with the scent of wet earth and wild blooms. He ducked beneath a low arch of vines, careful to avoid the razor-edged leaves, heart beating faster with each step. He heard it before he saw it. A burble of water, a hiss of steam. Pushing aside a broad leaf, Jackson found himself at the edge of a hidden hot spring, turquoise pools ringed by luminous moss. Steam rose in twisting ribbons. At the water's edge, Syrah bathed, her golden fur slick against her frame, muscles shifting as she moved. Jackson froze, caught in the spell of the moment. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, gilding the scene. He watched, barely breathing, not wanting to intrude. Then a traitorous twig snapped beneath his boot. Syrah turned, eyes sharp as knives. She studied him, the moment stretching. Then, instead of fleeing, she returned to her bath, dipping her hand into the water, sending ripples across the surface. The gesture was unmistakable. Acceptance. Jackson let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He sat at the pool's edge, careful to keep his movements slow. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Syrah glanced at him, a glint of amusement in her gaze. The air tingled, alive with the energy of something unspoken and new. After that day, Syrah no longer hid from him. She appeared openly, padding to the edge of the clearing as he worked, her purr a constant undertone that calmed both him and the restless Flora. Sometimes she'd watch him repair equipment, head tilted, tail flicking. Other times she'd curl in the shade, half dozing, one eye always on him. Their days became a quiet dance, Jackson moving through his tasks, Syrah nearby, her presence a gentle anchor. He found himself looking for her approval after every small success, savoring the moments when her purr softened or her ears relaxed in trust. One morning, as dawn spread violet and gold through the mist, Syrah stepped into the clearing and fixed Jackson with a look of intent. She gestured, flicking her tail toward the jungle. An invitation. He grabbed his field kit, slung it over his shoulder, and followed. The path wound through tangled undergrowth, thorns and carnivorous blooms brushing his boots. Syrah moved ahead, graceful and sure, but she paused when danger lurked, her tail signaling hazards, her gaze expectant. "Venomous creeper," Jackson warned, nudging a purple-tipped vine aside with his containment rod. Syrah watched, eyes narrowed in concentration, before stepping safely past. When a clutch of chittering, fanged blooms snapped at her heels, Jackson reached out, pulling her clear. The touch lingered, the space between them charged with shared relief. Syrah's ears flicked back in gratitude, and she brushed her cheek against his hand, a gesture of thanks that sent a jolt through him. They pressed on, moving in easy rhythm. When a toxic bramble blocked their path, Jackson knelt, inspecting its serrated leaves. "Wait," he murmured, then slipped his gloved hands beneath the growth, guiding Syrah around the danger. She moved close, her fur brushing his arm, and for a moment, she rested her hand on his shoulder, balance and trust joined. Their movements grew synchronous, each anticipating the other's steps. Respect deepened into something warmer, an affection neither dared name, but both felt in every shared glance, every lingering touch. Eventually, the jungle opened onto a concealed glade, a cathedral of light and shadow. At its center stood a massive, crystalline organism, its surface faceted and shimmering, colors shifting beneath like trapped lightning. Dormant, yet pulsing with faint life. Syrah stopped at the edge, her purr intensifying until the air itself seemed to vibrate. She drew Jackson close, pressing her side against him, eyes shining with hope and fear. He stared at the Loomis, awe prickling his skin. "What is it?" he whispered. Syrah's purr swelled, filling the glade with sound and resonance. She laid her hand against the Loomis, then guided Jackson's hand to join hers. The surface was cool, thrumming beneath his palm with hidden power. The world dissolved. Color and sound exploded behind Jackson's eyes. Visions poured through him. Cities of living crystal, Felinari weaving songs through the air, the Loomis at the heart of their world. Its psychic core, the wellspring of their unity. He saw the calamity, a darkness sweeping the jungle, the Loomis flickering and dying. Syrah alone, kneeling in the silent glade, her purr a desperate beacon. He understood, all at once. The Loomis needed a resonance it had never known, a spark from an outsider, something only he could provide. Syrah's purr had been the call. He was the answer. He opened his eyes, breath ragged. Syrah was pressed against him, her purr now a song, the glade alive with light. He met her gaze, his voice a whisper. "You brought me here for this. To awaken it. To save you." Syrah nodded, hope and gratitude mingling in her eyes. Jackson pressed his hand firmer to the crystal, feeling the energy surge between them, an unspoken promise, a beginning. Jackson's chest heaved as he staggered back from the crystalline heart of the Loomis. The world shimmered with afterimages, echoes of the vision still burning behind his eyes. He turned to Syrah. In the moonlight, her golden fur seemed spun from starlight, her posture regal yet vulnerable, a living remnant of a civilization's lost hope. For the first time, he saw her wholly, not just as a survivor or a guardian, but as the bearer of a burden both ancient and beautiful. Slowly, almost reverently, Jackson reached out and cupped her face between his hands. His thumbs traced the delicate fur along her jaw, feeling the strength in her tense muscles, the warmth radiating through her skin. "I understand," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe and certainty. Syrah's amber eyes widened, her purr shifted, a question, a tremor of longing and relief, and she leaned into his touch. In that moment, words became unnecessary. Feelings poured between them in a silent current, his reverence, her gratitude, his wonder, her trust, curiosity, loneliness, hope, all entwined, woven together as surely as the roots in Lyra's jungle. Her tail curled around his wrist, a gentle anchor. He pressed his forehead to hers. The music of her purr grew richer, resonant, answering every pulse of his heart. His intent shaped hers. Her body language mirrored his every breath, every hesitation. Together, they formed a harmony deeper than language. Night deepened. Crickets and distant thunder filled the air. Jackson, reluctant to break the spell, finally drew away and reached into his field bag. He produced a battered music player, an old relic from Earth, its casing scarred but its soul intact. "I want to share something with you," he said, thumbing the power on. He set the speaker near the Loomis and scrolled through tracks. Soft piano chords unfurled, gentle and slow, threading through the glade with a human longing both foreign and strangely familiar. Syrah tensed, ears flicking back, tail twitching in uncertainty. But as the melody swelled, light, exploratory, beckoning, she relaxed, curiosity overcoming caution. Jackson extended his hand, palm up. "Dance with me?" His voice was barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then placed her clawed fingers in his, palm to palm. Her touch was light but electric. Slowly he guided her, letting the music lead. They circled each other, feet moving in halting, tentative rhythm, laughter trembling at the edge of their silence. Syrah's movements grew more confident with each measure, her head resting against his shoulder as the dance grew closer, the circle tighter. Her purr blended with the notes, filling the glade with warmth and promise. Their bodies fit together, every motion a gentle conversation, her tail curling around his waist, his hand pressed to the small of her back, their breathing synchronized. The Loomis glimmered beside them, casting shifting rainbows across their entwined forms. Jackson stopped, cradling her face once more. He tilted her chin, meeting her gaze. For a heartbeat, the universe narrowed to her eyes, the promise of something new and fragile blooming in the space between them. He leaned in, their lips meeting in a deep, lingering kiss. It was both question and answer, dissolving the last barrier. Syrah melted into him, her purr trembling into a song, their bond sealed with that single electric touch. Suddenly, the night split open. A deafening roar shattered the peace. A ship, engines screaming, its hull gleaming with the predatory lines of Helios Industries. Floodlights swept the jungle, sending shadows spinning. Syrah wrenched away, fur bristling, claws unsheathed. She pressed close to Jackson, body tense, every muscle ready for war. A sleek gunship set down just beyond the glade, sending leaves and spores whirling in a cyclone. The emblem of Helios glowed on its side, corporate blue, cold and merciless. Ramps slammed down, armed patrols poured out, rifles gleaming, armor glinting. Drones hovered overhead, scanners flickering as they sliced through the undergrowth. Syrah crouched, a low growl rumbling in her chest. "No," Jackson murmured, grabbing her wrist. "We survive. Together. Not by dying. By fighting smart." She hesitated, searching his face, then nodded. Jackson's mind raced. He knew these men, mercenaries, hired for their ruthlessness, programmed to seize and destroy. But he also knew the jungle, its language and secrets. That would be their weapon. They slipped into the trees, moving as one. Jackson raided his kit, gathering explosive seed pods, sticky paralytic vines, a handful of hallucinogenic fungi. Syrah watched, eyes shining with understanding, then darted ahead, her purr shifting to a low, predatory hum. The first patrol wandered too close. Syrah lured them with a flash of gold, vanishing into the shadows. As the soldiers followed, Jackson hurled a seed pod. It burst in a cloud of spores, vines writhing around ankles, pinning the invaders as they collapsed, paralyzed and gasping. The next group stumbled into a patch of fungus. Within moments they dropped their weapons, giggling and weeping, clutching at phantom visions as Syrah darted through their ranks, claws raking, never killing but always disabling. Each skirmish was a dance. Jackson's traps disoriented and separated the enemy. Syrah struck with feline precision, a shadow among shadows, her golden fur almost invisible in the bioluminescent gloom. Fear spread through the patrols, confusion, terror, disbelief. They fired at ghosts. They fled from whispers. The jungle itself seemed to rise against them, every plant an accomplice, every shadow a threat. But the assault did not relent. The last squad advanced with brutal discipline, led by a commander whose armor gleamed with the hard edges of authority. He strode into the glade, weapon raised, visor reflecting the pulse of the Loomis. Jackson and Syrah stood before the crystal side by side. The commander's voice echoed cold and sharp. "Step aside. By order of Helios Industries, this artifact is now corporate property. Surrender, or be eliminated." Syrah tensed, ready to leap. Jackson grabbed her arm, voice urgent. "No, trust me, there's another way." She stared at him, torn between rage and hope. Jackson turned her gently, pressing her hand to the Loomis. He wrapped his arms around her, closing the circle, drawing her into an embrace that was both shield and promise. He closed his eyes, opening himself completely, pouring every memory, every hope, every spark of love into the crystal. Syrah's purr surged, intertwining with his heartbeat, amplifying the resonance until the glade trembled with sound and light. The Loomis erupted, no longer dormant, but radiant, alive. A wave of energy burst forth, cascading through the glade and beyond. Light and sound, memory and emotion, centuries of Felinari love and loss, laughter and grief, hope and longing, flooded into the minds of the invaders. The soldiers staggered, weapons falling from nerveless hands. Visions overwhelmed them, the unity of the Felinari, the pain of exile, the beauty of the jungle, the ache of loneliness, the ecstasy of connection. Even the commander faltered, visor cracking, knees buckling as raw humanity broke through his training. Above, the gunship's engines screamed. Pilots, struck by visions of their own lost loves and old fears, panicked. The ship lifted, thrusters scorching the soil as it fled into the night, leaving its broken squads scattered in the shimmering grass. The glade fell silent, bathed in the afterglow of the Loomis. Syrah leaned into Jackson, purr subsiding to a gentle murmur. He held her close, their victory as much in their bond as in their survival. Together, they watched as dawn began to break, hope blooming in the light, the world remade by the harmony they had forged. The Loomis pulsed with a new, thrumming vitality, its radiant core bathing the glade in a shifting tapestry of light. Luminous spores drifted on the soft night breeze, spiraling into the canopy and stitching the jungle together in strands of living gold. Where once silence had ruled, now the air sang with quiet, miraculous renewal. Leaves unfurled wider, moss shimmered richer, and the wounded earth knitted itself whole. Jackson stood at the heart of it all, arms wrapped around Syrah, her purr a gentle vibration pressed against his chest. He buried his face in her golden hair, breathing in the scent of wildflowers and rain-soaked fur. The world felt smaller now, but deeper. As the jungle healed, so did he. But even in this sanctuary, a choice pressed at him, heavy and inevitable. Jackson's mind raced as he watched spores drift skyward, carrying the jungle's secret. Should he expose Helios's crimes, send a warning to Earth, become the hero who saved an entire world from corporate greed? Or should he protect Lyra, conceal the miracle, and let it remain untouched by human ambition? He looked down at Syrah, at the way her tail twined softly around his hip, her gaze trusting and bright in the moonlight. The answer settled in his bones. Some things were too precious for glory. Late that night, he composed his report to the consortium. Every word was a calculated deception. Catastrophic containment breach, environmental collapse, station integrity lost. Lyra must be designated high-risk quarantine. No salvage possible. He appended sensor logs he'd doctored himself. Swathes of toxic readings, falsified footage of withering crops and rotting trees. In the final line, he recommended Lyra be sealed, forbidden to all but the most desperate or reckless. When he pressed send, it felt like closing the last door on his old life. Jackson sat for a long time afterward, staring at the dead comm screen, listening to the jungle's renewed heartbeat. All ties to Earth, the acclaim, the rivalry, the endless struggle for funding, faded into a distant echo. He returned to Syrah, walking the luminous path back to the glade. She was waiting, perched atop a carpet of glowing moss, head tilted in welcome. He knelt, drawing her close. Together they began to build a home at the base of the Loomis, weaving branches and soft leaves into a haven that felt both ancient and new. Nights, they curled together beneath the living crystal, Syrah's purr echoing through the mossy walls, Jackson's arm draped over her as starlight spilled between the leaves. Weeks passed, then months. One morning, Syrah guided his hand to a spot at the Loomis's base. There, nestled in the moss, a tiny crystal sprout glimmered, delicate, perfect, impossibly alive, the first new Loomis in generations. Syrah's eyes filled with tears. Jackson, breathless, pressed his lips to her temple. The future had returned. Years rolled forward, measured not in clocks or data logs, but in cycles of growth and the shifting symphony of Lyra's wild light. Jackson marked time by the unfurling of Loomis sprouts and the ever-changing patterns of fungi blooming across the jungle floor. The old biosphere station, once a cold outpost of Earth, became something else entirely. Its walls softened by moss and trailing vines, its towers woven into the limbs of a colossal tree. Technology and nature blended, circuits humming beneath bark and petals, solar panels shading clusters of bioluminescent orchids. Syrah was the heart of this world now. She moved through the forest in simple woven garments, her golden fur shining beneath loose fabric, her presence both regal and gentle. She spoke Jackson's language in a soft, melodic cadence, and when words failed, her thoughts brushed his mind in psychic clarity. Images, memories, questions, laughter. He no longer needed to guess her meaning. He simply understood. Each morning, dawn painted the lab in shifting green and gold. Syrah would appear, arms full of sweet spiral fruit, her movements as fluid as running water. She'd set the fruit on his table, slip behind him, and wrap her arms around his shoulders, her purr humming through his skin. "Good morning," she'd murmur, pressing her cheek to his. "You worked late again." He'd smile, pulling her close until she sat in his lap, their lips meeting in a practiced, loving kiss. Her tail curled possessively around his leg, a silent promise. "I can't help it," he'd reply, tracing the gold threads in her arm. "This place never stops growing." She'd nip his jaw in mock annoyance, then laugh, a sound like bells and wind. "Neither do you, my melody maker." Their happiness was more than private joy. It pulsed outward, nourishing the psychic web that bound the Loomis and the jungle together. When Syrah laughed, the sprouts shivered with delight. When Jackson kissed her, moss bloomed brighter underfoot. Their passion, a steady flame, was the secret sun at the center of Lyra's wild rebirth. One morning, as Jackson catalogued a new cluster of glowing fungi, Syrah appeared at his side, eyes bright with mischief. She brushed her nose against his cheek, voice low and full of promise. "The sprouts are calling," she whispered. "They want to feel your melody." He set aside his datapad and scooped her up, laughter shaking his chest. She clung to him, purring, as he carried her through sun-dappled undergrowth to the heart of the glade. The moment their feet touched the moss, the ambient hum of the Loomis rose in greeting, a chorus of ancient voices and newborn hope. They lay together beneath the living crystal, surrounded by newborn sprouts casting soft rainbows over their skin. The moss was cool and yielding. Syrah pressed close, her breath mingling with his, their thoughts flowing freely in perfect clarity. Jackson closed his eyes, letting the memories rise. He shared everything, the terror and awe of their first meeting, the electric brush of her fur beneath alien stars, the wild dance in the glade, the fierce battle against Helios, the day the first sprout opened to the sky. Syrah received each one, not as stories, but as lived experience, her purr echoing his wonder, her mind filling with images of his past. Then she opened herself to him, memories streaming from her soul into his. The sorrow of centuries spent alone, the agony of watching her people fade, the moment hope returned with the first new Loomis, the simple joy of waking each day at his side. He felt a thread of sadness, distant but real, the ache for the old world, the lost songs and voices of Earth. Syrah felt it too, her fingers stroking his jaw, her eyes searching his. "You still miss it," she murmured, both aloud and in thought. Jackson brushed her hair from her face, holding her gaze. "I miss what I left. But you, this, are my home." "This is where I belong." Syrah smiled, her eyes shining with love. Then you are Felinari now, melody and heart. Their bodies entwined as the sprout's chorus swelled around them, a song of unity, of two worlds joined, of hope renewed and forever blooming. Night draped the luminous glade in velvet darkness, pierced by the gentle pulse of crystal light and 1,000 drifting spores. Jackson lay with Syrah nestled in the crook of his arm, her purr a deep, contented thrum against his chest. Above, the stars wheeled in slow procession. One, bright and steady, caught his gaze, a satellite, gliding across the heavens, a slender thread tying him to the world he had left behind. He watched it in silence, memory stirring like a breeze through old pages. Images rose, the bustle of an Earth city, the din of academic halls, the weight of expectations and regret. The ache was faint, almost sweet, but it lingered. Syrah shifted, her tail brushing his thigh. She propped herself on one elbow, amber eyes catching the faintest reflection of the sky. Concern flickered in her gaze. "Your heart is far away," she said softly, her voice threaded with worry. He smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "It's just a memory, a little ache for what was. I have no wish to leave. You've made me a cultivator of worlds, Syrah. My roots are here." Her purr deepened, strong and sure, and she pressed closer, their bond reaffirmed in the night's hush. The Loomis's gentle music swelled, answering her happiness. Then, abruptly, the harmony shifted. A discordant note, harsh, grating, rippled through the glade. The crystal's glow faltered, colors clashing, the psychic web vibrating with unease. Syrah gasped, her hands clutching her temples. "Do you feel it?" she whispered, voice raw with pain. "Something is wrong. Far away. A blight in the song. Poison in the land." Jackson sat up, heart pounding. He closed his eyes, tuning himself to the psychic current. Where there should have been a tide of green, pulsing life, there was only static. Pain, silence, the slow death of the jungle. He sprang to his feet, moving to the lab's console woven into a living branch. Fingers flying, he summoned orbital data, eyes scanning environmental feeds. There it was, a toxic bloom spreading across the far continent, the psychic hum utterly gone. Cross-referencing recent events, he saw the cause. A Helios Industries drilling probe, its crash site a scar of raw, leaking metal. "During the retreat," he muttered, rage tightening his jaw. "Their probe went down, days ago. The machines are poisoning the ground. I should have checked sooner." Syrah touched his arm, steady and unwavering. "This is not your fault, Jackson. You gave us hope. Now we heal this, together." He nodded, gratitude and determination mingling in his chest. They prepared in silence, Jackson assembling packs of tools, vials of acid, and samples of the most aggressive local vines. Syrah gathering woven cloaks and a satchel of restorative spores. Their eyes met, agreement unspoken. They traveled by night, following the psychic trail of sickness, the land itself guiding their steps. The vibrant forest gradually faded, green replaced by the gray of dying leaves and the dull brown of withered trunks. The air thickened, metallic and sharp, stinging their throats with every breath. Even the spores fled this place, the soil bare and broken. At the edge of the blight, Syrah faltered, collapsing to her knees. Her fur stood on end, her eyes glassy with pain. The psychic silence battered her, every step an agony. "I can't," she choked, clutching her chest. "It hurts too much. The song is gone." Jackson knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her trembling form. "You've already done so much," he murmured, voice fierce with love. "Wait here. I'll fix this. I promise, Syrah." He pressed a kiss to her brow, then rose and strode alone into the poisoned land. Each step was a march into another world, one where color had fled, and every living thing recoiled. The trees were little more than skeletal hands, the ground slick with oil and streaked with unnatural rust. Even the wind sounded hollow. He found the probe at the center of the devastation, a monstrous cylinder, half buried in the ruined soil. Machinery whined from within, grinding and relentless, pumping toxic sludge into the earth. The air around it shimmered with heat and the reek of chemicals. Jackson circled the wreck, mind racing. The main power core, still pulsing faint blue, was shielded by a crumpled panel. Leaking coolant hissed from ruptured pipes. He unshouldered his kit, pulling free a vial of acid and a tangled cluster of metal-eating vine, its tendrils already twitching hungrily. He worked quickly, prying open the panel and splashing acid across the exposed mechanisms. Sparks flew, the metal groaning. He shoved the vine into the breach, watching as it latched on and burrowed deep, devouring circuitry with ravenous efficiency. Suddenly, alarms blared from the probe. The whine of machinery rose to a fever pitch. Then, with a final shriek, the drill shuddered and fell silent. A pulse of silence swept outward, the psychic static ebbing. Jackson stepped back, chest heaving, sweat stinging his eyes. The quiet was profound. Then, somewhere beneath the ruined soil, something shifted. Green shoots pushed up through the sludge, tentative but unbroken. The earth exhaled. A distant sound, faint and pure, drifted through the air. A musical chime from the glade, echoing across the sprouts and through the web of Loomis. Syrah's call, the song of hope, reaching him even here. He stumbled back toward the edge of the blight, knees weak with relief. Syrah was waiting, arms wide, tears shining in her eyes. She rushed to him, enveloping him in a fierce embrace, her purr returning. Strong, joyous, unstoppable. Around them, the earth trembled as new life surged through the cracks, and the psychic chorus of Lyra rose in answer. Jackson buried his face in her shoulder, breathless with exhaustion and triumph. "We did it," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Syrah's purr swelled, and above them the sprouts sang, the first true harmony of Lyra, reborn. Dawn unfurled over the Loomis glade, painting Lyra in molten gold. The jungle teemed with vibrant, surging life, flowers blossoming in impossible shapes, vines braided with delicate strands of living crystal. The station, once a sterile outpost, now rose from the forest floor like the fruit of some ancient tree. Walls alive with moss and circuitry, roots and conduits, sharing the same dark earth. The air shimmered with the hum of energy, the ever-present pulse of the Loomis at the heart of all things. Jackson stood at the edge of the glade, boots half buried in glowing moss, surveying the world he had helped remake. He looked not like the exile who had arrived years before, but as if he belonged to Lyra, hair sun-bleached, hands calloused, eyes kindled with purpose. Syrah moved beside him, golden fur radiant in the new light, her presence both wild and gentle. They were partners, lovers, architects of this living paradise. The day began as so many did, with Syrah appearing in the lab, arms cradling a bowl of spiral fruit and a mischievous smile playing on her lips. She set the fruit beside his half-finished notes, then slipped behind him, looping her arms around his chest and burying her nose in his neck. "Busy scientist," she purred, her voice thick with affection. "Did you forget to eat again?" He grinned, leaning back into her warmth. "I was hoping you'd bring breakfast." She nipped his ear in mock rebuke, then laughed, a sound like sunlight on water. "You would starve without me." Completely helpless, Jackson agreed, twisting in his chair to pull her onto his lap. He kissed her, slow and deep, feeling the easy familiarity of their intimacy. Sira's tail curled around his leg, anchoring him, a constant reassurance that he belonged. They lingered in the soft golden light, sharing fruit and laughter. Sira traced circles on his arm, her gaze playful. "The sky flowers are blooming early this season," she said. "The Loomis feels your joy. The whole forest is singing." Jackson looked at her, heart swelling. "Then let's not keep them waiting." He rose, sweeping her into his arms. Sira laughed again, clinging to his neck as he carried her through the winding corridors of living wood and light, out into the glade. As they emerged, the world seemed to greet them. Glowing sprouts rose, trembling with anticipation, and the psychic song of the Loomis swelled in welcome. The air itself vibrated with happiness, each note a reflection of their shared life. They lay together in the moss, the ground warm and yielding beneath them. Sira curled into his side, her purr a rich undertone to the symphony all around. Their minds brushed, memories mingling, flowing between them without effort or hesitation. Jackson felt the pulse of her emotions, the memory of ancient sorrow, the relief of healing, the exhilaration of new growth. He offered her his own, the awe of first discovery, the ache of loneliness, the fierce, blooming love he now felt every day. Their bodies moved in quiet harmony, hands tracing familiar patterns, mouths meeting in gentle kisses. There was no urgency now, only the profound comfort of union. Each touch, each sigh, resonated outward, feeding the psychic web that wove jungle, crystal, and heart together. Moss glowed brighter beneath their skin. The sprouts leaned in, singing a wordless chorus. Jackson traced the golden fur of Sira's arm, marveling at the strength and grace that had once seemed so alien. "I sometimes wonder," he murmured, "what I would have become if I'd never come here." She pressed her forehead to his, amber eyes soft with understanding. "You would have found another garden to tend, another world to heal. But I would still be alone. I would still be waiting." He closed his eyes, holding her tighter. "You saved me as much as I saved you." Their bond was complete, no longer just a partnership of need, but a fusion of everything they were. Human ingenuity and felinary instinct, science and feeling, curiosity and intuition, art and wildness. Where he brought analysis and creation, she brought connection and song. Together, they had remade the world. They spoke little, letting the song of the Loomis and the psychic chorus fill the space between words. Sira showed him the memory of her people's first awakening, the rush of joy, the terror of loss, the hope that never truly died. Jackson gave her the taste of Earth's rain, the sound of a piano in the dark, the shape of human laughter. These were not stories, but lived experience, shared as easily as breath. As the sun climbed, they rested in the glow of growing things. The station's silhouette was now part of the jungle, entwined with living branches and crystalline blooms. From somewhere distant came the rustle of sky flowers opening, petals releasing a scent like honey and ozone. The Loomis's heart pulsed stronger than ever, its energy the axis of paradise. Jackson felt the fullness of his journey, a quiet astonishment at how far he had come. He was no longer the exiled scientist, searching for validation in data and discovery. He was a gardener of worlds, a creator of new life. Sira was no longer a lonely guardian. Her legacy was alive again, her heart healed by love and belonging. Sira rolled to her side, propping her head on her hand. "You are happy?" she asked, voice teasing, but her eyes searching for truth. He smiled, brushing her hair back from her face. "I have never been more myself than I am here, with you." Her purr deepened, the sound rippling out to the sprouts and the sky flowers, who echoed it in their own music. "Then let's never stop making this world together." They lay side by side, moss and crystal cradling them, the dawn a soft promise overhead. The planet itself seemed to sing, a harmony of two souls entwined, their love woven into every leaf and every note of the Loomis's endless anthem. Jackson drew Syrah close, feeling the pulse of life all around. This was his home. This was his forever. And as the chorus of Lyra swelled, their love became its song, an unending harmony, remaking paradise with every sunrise.